dang it, why wasn't it going?
Yeah,
So,
I
all right.
100% agree. Hold on. How am I? How am I centered? There we go.
Perfect. Yeah, and the video's mainly so that we've got actual rapport and save it for posterity and who knows, maybe like a members thing, whatever. But mainly it's audio only, so
Cool.
if we get naked, nobody will know except us.
I don't know if you were wearing pants the first few weeks. I wasn't, but eventually you kind of feel like you should wear pants at least 50% of the time.
Exactly. It's like, I'm gonna be negotiating a big deal. I should
Yeah,
probably not be wearing sweats for
yeah.
this.
I once had a friend who told me, whenever you ask for money, wear a tie. And that was like a rule that she had, but I never quite agreed. Like, I don't want to be overdressed either.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. In my
You know?
tux. Please, sir, may
Yeah.
I have my
Yeah, exactly.
$1,000 you owe me?
Exactly. Where are you? Where's your home?
I live in Chicago. So
Ah, nice.
I used to tell people, I'd say, all right, well, I get my mail in Chicago, but I basically live on the road. But all my gigs got canceled, and I was like, well, what am I gonna do at this time? All right, talk to the coolest people on the planet. Let's
Ah,
start this podcast.
it's like you have to. I was just about to say you have to do something, but whenever I tend to say that, I think we grow up saying that, but
Yeah.
nobody has to do anything. Like we can do anything we want. We're
Yep.
free, right? But you feel like you should do something if you're the type of person who likes to be busy, like and likes to be curious and likes to feel useful. It would. It's weird. I was traveling all the time too, and then I'm like, okay, I can't just sit. I can't just stop learning and thinking and trying things.
Yep.
But you figure something out pretty quick,
Right. Right. Exactly.
you know.
So yeah, I'm actually still doing I'm doing Zoom shows. Like this is the poster for my mind reading show. I'm kind of
Cool.
a flavor of magician that specialized in mentalist tricks. So that's kind of my
One
shtick.
second. You're
Yeah.
freezing. I'm gonna try. I'm gonna try Wi-Fi. Video. There we go.
Welcome back.
Thank you. Yeah, it's let me see. There we go. That seems to be working. How real time does this feel? Are you freezing? I'm not freezing.
Yeah,
Does it seem
you're
fine?
you're doing pretty good, and the audio's not
Okay.
chopping out, all that good
Okay.
stuff. So that
Cool.
works.
Cool. All right. Well, so you're in Chicago. I'm in Toronto. I'm in Stratford, actually.
Okay, cool.
Stratford is two hours outside of Toronto. I have a YouTube studio in Toronto, and I'm there a lot, and it's much faster, better internet. So I hope this works. Hope it doesn't interrupt our hang.
Right on. Yeah, no worries. And that's the beauty of editing. All the
Yeah.
hiccups, it is
Yep.
zoink gone. I love
Yep.
it.
Yep.
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 So yeah, let's just like dig in. Is there anything you want to stay away from or not highlight?
Nope.
Awesome. That
Nope.
kind of live as an open
Nope.
book. Use
Yeah.
truth as a shield, baby. Like can't hold anything against
Yeah.
me. I've already told the world,
Yeah.
so that's a good way to do it.
It's true. The We also like when you live in a world where almost everybody is like hedging what they say or like finding a business way to say it, or they have like their own language in which they say it, or they're lying, or they're exaggerating, or they're trying to edge things their way. The truth's fucking powerful as shit in that world. It's so
Yeah, it is.
powerful.
Yeah, it
Like
is.
it's so, and it's easy if you just tell them the truth all the time. You never have to worry about what you said or getting it right or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Exactly. Awesome. So how would you introduce yourself so that way I don't get it wrong? I like to give you the honor of introducing yourself, and we'll just dig in from there.
Um, wow, that's tricky. I think it gets harder if you really think about it for any length of time, or it should. Like you hope it gets harder. Like we'd all hopefully become more complicated as our life goes on. But what I do, Robin is my name, and what I do is I study martial arts, and I look for valuable information in there, things that it's entertaining or educational or philosophical or funny or something, and then I share it with people. And that's what I do. That's my calling. I'm obsessed with studying martial arts. It's kind of my favorite thing in the world. It's a lens through the way I see everything. And sorry that something interrupted us. But yeah, it's a lens through which I see the world, and that's what I do for a living, and that's what I do for fun.
I love it. That's a really good detail about hopefully you get more complicated as your life goes on. I like that. 'Cause I've always said I just hope for more interesting problems. If I have the
Mm,
same problems now as I had 5 years ago, I'm not I'm not moving in the right
mm,
direction.
very true. Very, very true. Uh, you Ideally you get problems that you're so lucky to have, right? Like if you're going in the right direction, the new problems will pop up. They might seem like a problem, like, oh my God, how do I figure out this work thing? And then you realize, oh wait, that's a great problem to have because I have this cool job that I earned or found. Yeah, I mean, life should get more complicated. Um, I think we're more complicated too. I think the last number of decades, I feel like we like a person in public or a regular person or people who watch other human beings be creative and hip hop or jazz or painters or people who act or whatever they see around them. We've wanted to make things easy to understand and create narratives. But real people are nuanced and weird and funny, and sometimes they're nice, and sometimes they're less nice, and sometimes we think one thing and we're quite sure of it, and a few weeks later, with new information, we think a different thing. And I think that's good. I think we're supposed to get more complicated. I think we're supposed to be harder to understand, and it's supposed to be harder to understand ourselves. I think that's a good thing. That's a journey.
Yeah, that's a good indicator that progress is being made. You're learning. If you can hold me to what I said 5 years ago, that's a sad state of affairs. Yeah.
Unless it's something that's fairly universal, like gravity's real. Okay,
Right.
like if you said 5 years ago gravity was real, and then 5 years later I asked you, and you still believe that, that's something we're okay with. Like it's like okay, I get that. But if you were like the housing market always goes up, or like just anything, like almost anything else, you know, I am liberal minded in this topic. Well, what is liberal minded or conservative minded or economics moving upwards or downwards? These are things that always change. These are always changing things. So you should always be changing.
I like that because proper alignment to reality requires constant adjustment because reality
Mm,
is shifting. And that is no more apparent than in the world of martial arts. So, how did you
mhm.
get involved in martial arts to begin with?
So I was a little kid. I was very, very fragmented in my thinking, and I still am. I didn't have a good attention span. I didn't really like anything. I didn't have a lot of interest, although my parents described me as being curious. So the only thing I really wanted to do was martial arts. I saw it. And I did also gymnastics. I really appreciate dance. I appreciate it when humans move, when we try to figure out what we can do and where our limitations are and how to get better at certain things and where the plateaus are and how to break through them. But when people fight, that always just really, really, I found it compelling, because at the root, if you and I are fighting for any reason, for a contest, for any reason, we have conflicting objectives, like very strongly conflicting objectives. And yet, and both of us are not only trying to do what we want, but the other is trying to also stop us. And just there, you have an unlimited curiosity forever. But so I was curious about it as a kid. I started training first gymnastics, high diving. I did diving, then 3 meter and platform diving, and I just always kind of moved my body. I've always studied martial arts in some capacity or another. It's been my source of income and my joy and my passion and my hobby and my the center of which I live my days for the last 15 years or so, because I went and decided I would fight in a cage, and I did a train to fight, and I did it a number of times. So since that, getting ready for that, which is 15, 16 years ago, it's kind of been the center of everything that I study. But you're right, there are there's a lot of different points of progress to studying martial arts, and I believe what I'm about to say will apply to studying anything deeply. And that's, first you start to understand it, and you make certain structures and rules. Do this, don't do that. This means this thing. This works this way. And then you do it long enough, and you're like, wait a second, that is no longer true. That thing I believed is no longer true. Wait, the world changed. Or wait, I didn't understand it. My understanding has changed. My relationship to that thing has changed. The thing itself has changed. The language we use. So that constant state of change, I think if you study something that's ever changing, you get a lot more comfortable in general with the idea of change.
And you can navigate that dynamic of uncertainty because you're a lot more comfortable relating to things that are always changing. It's kind of like the measurement changes, kind of like the distance from your opponent or your objective
Mhm.
changes, but the ratios and relationships, there's a way to stay oriented that helps you navigate through that dynamic.
Yes, certain things are real. Like, they're real. If I get struck in my head and it jars me in such a way, my brain will shake and it will touch the side. I will suffer a concussion. I will not be able to operate. That's real. If I, get too much lactic acid is put into my body, it's probably because I've been burning too much sugars, and it's resulted in physiological problems. That's real, you know. Um, uh, but where I put my foot, uh, I must keep my foot in this position to do this thing. That's not real, or I must check this to then do this, always throw this way, never do this thing. None of that's actually real. You think that's real at first. The first 5 or 10 years, these rules seem to be real. Then you study long enough and you're like, wait, those were guidelines when I knew nothing to give me something. Now I realize those guidelines are untrue, or they used to be true, or they're no longer true, or they're untrue today, but they'll be true in a month, or they're situationally true. But yeah, it's ever changing, and your understanding of it changes. And my job is to study and understand martial arts, but then to also communicate it for various reasons, because I work for a TV show where people are fighting and I have a job there, or because I care about somebody seeing something I think is really cool, or because I'm searching for truth. But the communication becomes is another part of the job entirely.
And what's something that, from your experience, you feel is incredibly important and obvious about the value of studying martial arts? Like, I feel like I appreciate it, but when you try to communicate it to folks who don't have this burning passion and just think of it as punching and kicking,
Yeah.
you who does that,
Yeah.
what's the thing that is the most difficult to get across to people about the value of studying martial arts?
There's a lot in there. That's the kind of thing that I could just rant about for hours, because there's so many different aspects to that. But so one is, when you see these people punching and kicking each other, that is a way through which they can test themselves or push themselves, find out what they're capable of, learn something about themselves, and fight. But that is not the ultimate sort of result of studying martial arts. The result of studying martial arts is getting so comfortable with martial arts that you never hit anybody, that you never have to touch somebody or be touched. You train martial arts to find peace and serenity and confidence and awareness and acceptance of the world around you. All of that journey is that purpose. And the greatest martial artists will never hit anybody ever. It's just, that's the real destination to it. Watching boxers or karate fighters or UFC fighters or whatever, that's just a sporting example of it. That's one. Another one is, when you watch a fight. You are watching, and it's this is for me often the painful part. There's two men or women, two women's dreams that are happening right now. Their goals, one will succeed and one will fail, but not just the full consequence. I won, I lost, but there'll be millions of successes and failures within all of that. And then I think the biggest one for me is as you watch, and you can get this from watching a tennis player or a pianist or your nephew go through or niece go through medical school. You can get this from many things, but that idea of the growth mindset, that wherever you apply effort, you will find improvement. You will grow. If you want to become a better kick higher, you train to kick higher. If you want to run faster, you train to run faster. If you want to play piano better, you train to play piano better. That the two basic mindsets human beings can have is a fixed mindset, which is this is what I am. I guess that's all I can do, and a growth mindset, which is wherever I apply effort intelligently and do the proper things, I will grow. And you see that very specifically in fighting. You see it in any sort of individual sport or art or endeavor. You watch these people have a career and you're like, wow, when they were 19, they could do this. But by 23, they did this very differently. That is indisputable evidence of the power of the growth mindset. And you see that, and you get that when you study martial arts. The very act of going from white belt to black belt is if I work hard, I will make these progressions throughout my life. The greatest thing, clearly, my job and my life is structured around what I do. But the greatest thing that ever happened to me was the fluke that my parents saw that there would be value in this for me, and then brought me to train. They drove an hour and 45 minutes each way 3 times a week for a decade to take me to train this thing because I was obsessed with it. But that all good things in my life came from that.
That's amazing. In there's a detail about two people fighting for the same outcome, and one person wins, one person loses. And I really like the point that there are a million wins and a million losses within that.
Mhm.
And further, people being destroyed by success because they haven't
Mhm.
learned how to handle loss and then spiral out versus the person who can transform a loss into a greater win for their life.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
I think a lot of folks who were passively watching from home or whatever have a difficult time appreciating that winning can destroy you too.
Big time. Big time. There's a lot in that idea when you sort of extrapolate it fully out. Like, what is our like? What's the goal? What are we doing? Like, what is sort of the purpose of all this? Because you can break things down into purpose. My purpose is to win this fight. But if I win this fight but lose whatever my grand purpose is, be a good father, be a good person, be successful in life, contribute something, learn something, etc. But I win and it does something to my ego or it changes the path of my life. And then I end up being a bad person and living a bad life and not understanding how I got there. We sometimes forget that, like, there's micro wins inside of mini and losses, inside of mini wins and losses, inside of small wins and losses, inside of wins and losses that project all the way through to your life. Like, we think that winning the football game or winning the award or whatever is the thing, but I think the thing is ultimately try to contribute something good to, make your life be about something worthwhile. And you could win all the fights in the world and not do that, and you could lose all the fights in the world but ultimately be a father to a kid who cures cancer, like. So yeah, there's a lot in there, and there's oh god, there's so much in the idea of failure and losing. It's so key to everything. Like, it's so key to everything. The saddest, the worst I feel for people, the times where I either know somebody personally or exposed to somebody's way of thinking, and I feel the most pain for them, and I wish I could do something, is when they don't try at all out of the fear that failure is life wrecking. And failure isn't life wrecking. Failure is life shaping. It's really important to put yourself in a situation to fail.
That's a great detail. I love that. It's life shaping. Because I had a bit of that growing up. It's like, oh, I'm the smart kid. I was born smart. Instead of recognizing effort being a thing that pays off, I was the smart kid.
Mhm.
So then I didn't want to do anything that might make me look not smart, which
Mm.
held me back from looking stupid in public. So it just became a way of thinking that prevented me from doing stuff. And
For
letting go of
sure.
that is so freeing.
For sure, because looking stupid for a moment is a part of the path. There's so many other little elements to that. Is one, nobody's really paying attention to you or I or anybody else nearly what not even 1% as much as we might think. If you do something weird or out of character or bad or you fail at something, it's so momentary to every single person who consumes it because they're worried about their life. They're worried about what they might do wrong or where they might go wrong or what they just did or the sandwich they're having or the man or woman they're in love with or whatever. Like everyone's life is so complex that they don't care about your failures. They really don't. They might for a second tweet that you're an idiot, but that's meaningless, like in the grand scheme of things, against the idea that a short failure will help you grow, which could result in things that you can't even imagine in your future. But those things don't open up at all if you don't try.
Hmm.
But it's the type of thing that is getting talked about more. You see a lot. I see a lot of places where people are talking about the failures and the setbacks and the mistakes that got them somewhere. And I think that's a really important thing. And I think it's much more common conversation than it was in the '80s, where everything was great and we were all rich and famous and powerful. In the '90s when that was the mindset that you were born smart or you were born handsome and you're great and like that's not true. Everything's a path, and wherever you are on it, you can still get better tomorrow. You could be 58 years old and still, by 61, be a really good piano player. But yet, we often think that whatever we are is where we are, and that's it.
So you started doing martial arts early. You had awesome parents who were dedicated to helping you on that journey, and you're developing your skills and moving forward. How do you land into being a commentator? Like,
Mm.
was that part of the dream of being rich and famous and being on television, or was this just a cool way for you to talk about martial arts to a bigger audience?
It's interesting because what you just said is absolutely true for me right now. Like I just want to live as a martial artist and find cool ways to pop up into the world and share my thing. And I money has rarely, and I can't say never because that's probably not true, but it's so rarely been a motivating factor. One, and I've never been rich, but I've never been so poor that I missed 2 meals in a row. So and some have. So it's a different thing. It's an unfair thing to say or to suggest that everyone should see things this way. But the truth is I realized early that if I just didn't think about money, as long as I had enough to eat and to pay some form of rent, even if I had 3 or 4 roommates when I was young, if I didn't think about short-term money, probably I would do better in the long run at things. I would grow, become better at what I did. And ultimately, when I got older, I'd eventually make money. That was my thinking very quite young. Whereas, like, if I could really use an extra $100 and there was a job that would do it, but that didn't work in line with my ultimate goals, which was learn, get better, develop skills, etc. Or if there was a backward step in there that earned me $100, I wouldn't take it. Even if I needed that, even if I was eating just the noodles that we had. I realized that very early, and I believe strongly that if you're thinking about doing great work, learning things, improving at things, developing your art, or your skill, or whatever it is you do, and you prioritize that outside of money. Again, acknowledging you got to eat and you got to have a place to live, but don't take any loans and don't take any, don't get a big car and don't do any of that stuff. Just concentrate on getting good all the time and try not to think about money. You'll probably result in a better relationship with money later, and it'll come a little easier when all that stuff develops. So that was one. Now I could care less if I was ever on television again, because although it's fun and it's really neat, the environment, um, there's no direct relationship with it giving you a better life. In fact, for a lot of people, it's kind of somewhat harmful. It can really mess with who they are and what their meaning is. And so I don't do that, don't have that anymore. What I want to do from a personal standpoint, outside of, being a husband and the things that I want to be good at with my job, I want to grow, get better every day, and really understand something in a meaningful way. Try to find truth in it that somehow is either inspiring or educational, something, and just find ways to be able to do that in the world. So sometimes I'll do that breaking down animal fights, and sometimes I'll do that studying martial arts myself physically and shooting that. And sometimes, so I find little ways to kind of share it into the world. But between that, which I think is true now, and when I was 20, I sung in a rock band back then, and I did television. And I think I in my mind believed that if people knew my name, that somehow that would be intrinsically rewarding. And it actually wasn't at all. I became somewhat famous, small time famous in Canada for singing in a rock band, but not for my work, not for the crafts that I did, not for my skills, but just because I was kind of famous. I dressed interesting and I said funny things, and there was no joy in that. There was no intrinsic value in that. Whereas now, I feel like I don't care necessarily if somebody will take notice of what I did. I'm spending all the effort that I would have spent into getting people to notice my blog or video or my song or whatever. And now I'm putting that into just making the best work possible. And in the intrinsic reward is much, much, much higher. You can look and go, wow, I got so much better at what I do in the last 3 months or 11 months or whatever. It's so much more intrinsically rewarding than 100,000 people liked my picture. So I learned a lot in that process. Sorry to take such a long time to answer, but I think ultimately I'm at that point now where it's about the work and it's about the learning and it's about the sharing and it's about the actual meat. But I think early on I had to go through the process of making it about the frosting and the sugar and that a lot more to learn that. But I'm glad I did. I'm glad I did.
I like the way you put that. I had a stage name for about 8, 9 years, and I thought it would be a protective air gap between fans and that kind of magic allure of fame, so that
Mhm.
if somebody called me by my stage name, Johnny Zavant, I would then know they're in love with the character, not the person who has worked a lifetime to be this character. It still wound up being a refuge in the wrong way to run away from my personal life problems that I was creating, chasing being this onstage character. So
Mhm.
what started
Mhm.
as a protective measure actually wound up being the trap I thought I was protecting myself from, running for the approval of strangers and spending time away from community, family, friends, that kind of thing. So I can definitely appreciate going through that process. Really teaches you the value of being you and focusing on being the best you full bore. And another detail is when you have that North Star of ultimate focus, of here's
Mhm.
exactly what I want to do with my time on this planet, it really does make it easy to make decisions. I could use $100, but it will take me away in time from pursuing my ultimate goal. That's an easy no.
Mhm.
To
Mhm.
remain in this suffering to get me down the road. So I don't, I've never really appreciated how difficult it can be for some people to make those kinds of choices, because I've been in a similar dynamic as you. It's like, does this help me get there? No.
Mhm.
Then even if it's better in the short term, ultimately it's worse in the long term. So that's an easy no to very attractive temptations. But that's a really weird thing for a lot of people.
It is. It is. Somehow, my wife. I brought this thing up like 8 or 10 years ago. It's like, hey, have you ever seen this Maslow's hierarchy of needs? And she says, yeah, we were taught that in school. I'm like, I wasn't taught that in school. I just got sort of stumbled upon it while looking at sort of how we do the things that we do and why we do. But for people who don't know, Maslow's hierarchy of needs is basically, the base needs. We need oxygen and we need water and we need food, we need shelter and we need safety. We need the feeling that the basic things, and safety would be like tomorrow I'll also probably have those things. But outside of, and so you must address that first. Am I breathing? Am I drinking water? Am I eating? And do I have somewhere where I can stay safe to live another day? Once you have, and those are the minimum, and that whatever, there are people in the world who don't have that, or there are people in the world who have to fight and struggle to have that. So you got to get that. And that, and all the talk in the world about Mind Reader University or Bink or like making martial arts videos or learning to be a rapper or whatever we're into, none of that matters till you get those. But once you get those, that's all that matters. There's nothing else. We are eating, we have a job, or we now are comfortable enough that if I lose this unimportant job, I know from experience that I get another one quick enough that I will continue to eat, drink water, breathe air, and be safe. Once you have those, matter first, but once you have them, nothing else can. You can create a scenario in which nothing else matters but your dreams and your goals and the big picture of what you want, how you want to grow, what you want to become that'll be of value or fun or exciting, or you're going to learn things or whatever. At first, nothing matters but those, but then after you have those, nothing matters but the big picture. And not everybody agrees with that, because we do live in a world that sometimes it's nice to have a few new things. And bottle service in a bar probably is really fun, and all these things you can have are there. But I believe they're traps. They're traps that prevent you from where you're going. It's easy. I'm 50 years old. It's easy for me to say that now. When I was 25 years old, I would have heard a 50-year-old say that, and I thought that guy's an asshole. He's an idiot. He doesn't know how to live. Like, I'm not going to sit around and just, live so that hopefully when I'm 50, shit's good. But that's not what I'm saying either, because the path is exciting. The growth is exciting. The learning is exciting. The trying and failing is exciting. The path is the point. There is no destination. I hope I'm still doing this at 72 and I'm way better at it. And I know a lot more. And I look back and watch our podcast and laugh at how little I understood the path. That's what I hope. But yeah, you can stick to it and stay with it and just keep the important path going of what you're trying to achieve.
In a couple of minutes ago, you mentioned part of your work that is one of my favorite things in the world, which is breaking down animal fights and human fights, and it's fantastic. It is really
Thanks,
entertaining, and
man.
the love for it really comes through. So walk me through how in the world that came to be.
Hmm.
Like,
Hmm.
that's cool.
Yeah, thank you. I do love doing them, and once I kind of hit on them the way that they're happening, 3 years ago, I kind of hit on how this was gonna, how these things were gonna play, but mostly I was just like, I made a couple of little videos and I opened it with, "I'm Robin Black and this is your 1 minute breakdown." And all I was saying was, "This is me and this is what this is,"
Uh-huh.
and then I did a breakdown. And I did a few of them, and they took a few days each. And I did a couple, and I was like, "Wait a second, sometimes you have to figure out, do a lot of things, but then when certain things are really rewarding and really entertaining and really work and it all makes sense, just do a lot of that thing." And once I was doing them, I was like, "Wait a second, I think I should just keep doing this because it's fun, it's easy, I'm getting better every day. People seem to like, wait, I think I'll just do this for a couple of years." And to a certain, and it's a little extreme to say just do this for a couple of years, but it was, and still is, the primary focus of my creative work. But that feeling, that stumble where I came onto that like and you're going to talk to 100 people over the next year, and people are going to talk to you about the path of whatever they're working on or whatever they like. And if people listen to 50 of those, they'll find that the thing that all 50 have in common is it's a super nonlinear path to the thing. Like, it's super nonlinear. You can't ever plan it. It's partly those risks and failures that made it take shape. But basically, so 2007 or 8, I had my first pro MMA fight, and I had been training for quite a while before that. I was reasonably successful musician and very small time kind of entertainment television personality. Very small time, but people knew me. Then I was gonna go fight, and I wore eye makeup and nail polish and had big hair and leather pants and all that kind of stuff because I played in the glam rock band. It was part of
Uh-huh.
the character, like you were talking about building a character. And I went to fight, and people ridiculed me. They were like, they want to see this guy get killed. It was a very challenging journey. I fought, and I sort of earned my way through to earn kind of the respect of the OGs that had really built fighting in Canada, and I started working at a place called Fight Network. Fight Network was a 24-hour combat sports channel, kind of like the Food Network or like, Speed TV with cars, but it was all fighting. So it was small. It wasn't consumed by a lot of people. They didn't pay a lot of money. Again, money is very low on the priority in this case, but I understood right away. This is one of those places where you can just create. You just think 24 hours a day. There's got to be fight stuff. I mean, they're going to be open to creative ideas. There's a shortage, right? So I
Right.
just continued to sort of mine the things that I loved, and I always, for me, fighting's art. So I was like, what is there about the art? What is it about the artist? What is it about learning the art? What is it about expressing the art? My the big plus, I guess, now for me, but also weird, uncomfortable nature was I don't like sports, but I work in a field of sports. But by studying art within sport, you actually end up with a fully different connection to it. So by doing that, I eventually started to analyze technique. And it would take days and days and days of work. Editing was much slower back then. I had an editor, a graphics guy. We would build these 6 and 7 minute pieces where I would analyze UFC fights. And again, it took almost a week to build one. It took 7 or 8 people. 3 years ago, that company cut its entire creative department. So, and that 3 years ago, that people weren't aware as some of them are now, because 500 million people have watched my 1 minute breakdowns in the last 3 years. Half a fucking billion, which is wild. But before that, from about 2013 to 2017, I had made a couple hundred of these breakdowns, and they were kind of my thing. Um, and then all of a sudden, they cut the department. So now I had no job, and I went from having a 24-hour a day combat sports job with a salary. It was a small salary, but it was a salary nonetheless. To I had no job, but more importantly, the art that I had focused on for all this time, I couldn't make, because if you were to go on YouTube and Google it or search it, I had a giant TV here with video that was crafted by an editor and graphics zoomed in and zooms and arrows and a lighting guy and a mic and an editor who edited after. There was like 7, 8 people worked on it. And now I'm at home and I'm like, what the fuck am I going to do? So of course I looked for other jobs, but there weren't any. And I was like, what I'm not willing to do is just say, well, I guess I don't get to do that anymore. But I'm unable to do that because I don't have 7 people. So I bought an iPad. It was about $2,000 that I didn't have, and I figured out how to edit at a very low level. So I would grab video and I would edit it. And then one day I figured out how to freeze, and I would add freeze to it. Then I figured out how to put my voice on it. And then I figured out, if I found just the right sort of app that people use for golf, and it's a many step process now. There's 4 or 5 different apps. There's like a golf app that people use to analyze golf swings and all these different things. But I just said, I have to figure out how to do this myself. And then ultimately I was able to, through, I don't know, 100, 200 hours of work, watching YouTube videos of 12-year-old girls saying, this is how you edit on iMovie. And that's how I learned, until I started making them. Then I was like, wait a second. I'm not wearing a $3,000 suit standing in a lit studio with 7 other people anymore, but I am still doing what I love to do. And not only that, but by the time I was doing it, now I know how to edit. Now I know how to put sound on things. Now I know how to do graphics. I taught myself to do all of those things because I had to. So, sorry, again, I take a long time
It's
when I
literally
get to
why
hang
you're
out and
here. It's
yeah,
all good.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Uh, just when I get the chance to think things out loud, I get excited by them. And these are really exciting memories, and memories I'm proud of. But you said, how did you do them? And the answer was, everything was taken away from me. But I still had to do it. I was pretty sure I was put on earth. To me, uh, um, martial arts analysis is my lifestyle. The content I make is a physical actualization of my study, and the jobs that I sometimes do, where I do sometimes put on a suit and go on TV and talk about them, is a job version of that. But studying martial arts and telling people about it and going, look at this cool thing, look at it, is my lifestyle. So once I figured out how to do it, then it was, I started then seeing it in everything. Now that I'm, and that's the other thing. again, sometimes it's the setbacks and the failures. The UFC came out and they created a scenario in which they will either sue people or deplatform them or attack them in some way if you use their footage, because they signed a deal with ESPN saying it's only for them. So all of a sudden now I couldn't use UFC footage. So now I'm like, well, how about this old fight? How about these, two uh, um, mutual combat between two individuals in a grocery store? Hey, wait, these two cats fighting. Well, it's just movement. How does the body work? Then you study a little bit on the biology, a little bit on the physics, a little bit on these things. You start to search for truth. It's the same route. And all of a sudden, 3 years later, I made 1,400 of them from all different kinds. And I analyze, people on bikes and cars and things falling and almost anything. It's the root of analysis is basically what's going on. I don't know. Well, what do I have to do to figure out? Okay, I better study that thing. Okay, now I don't understand that. Okay, well, how do I figure that out? And it's just a long, curious quest of continually answering, how did this happen? Why did this happen? Okay, well, that's neat. So, like, let's say I punch you and you go to put your hand up and I hit you. And I'll say, how did that happen? Well, we stood in a particular area and I used my body in this way that caused that. Well, why did that happen? Well, because my brain did a thing and it trained my nervous system. Well, how did that happen? Well, I trained it through preparation and practice and stuff. Well, why? Well, because I had and you just keep going deeper and deeper. How, why? And that's analysis. And if you've done it enough with enough truth and enough sort of improvement along the way at your own studying your own process, eventually you can trust that you're doing it in a way where you're searching for truth. The problems arise when you're not searching for truth or you just jump to conclusions, but that's another story.
Yeah, and that's a good angle to go down, because there are folks who say that all truth is relative, that nothing is real, and strangely they'll still flinch if you hit them. Like, there's
Right,
there's no
right.
way around the physics of momentum. Like,
Hmm.
you can build a lot off of that. So the search for
Yeah,
truth is a thing that is real, that exists, and there are consequences to ignoring physics. And that's a good place to start building a life.
yeah. Uh, the search for truth, whatever, everything you're studying, everything you're into, everything that I'm studying, everything that I'm into, if we really are dedicated to what we're doing, we're really trying to find the truth and we're trying to disprove what we believe ourselves. The search for that, as you study anything, you study the mechanics of that thing. So all of a sudden, we find ourselves at a place where we're studying what is truth, how and why are we searching for it, how and why are we failing to search for it or purposefully searching for it wrong, what are the consequences of these mistakes, etc. And the whole world right now is really kind of about that. If 2020 is about anything, it's about this very thing. And when you study your own process, you start to see it. And so if we put somebody, news, of course, is the one that hits us all the most. News and politics, science gets tied into that. I just talk about people fighting in a cage. If something is or isn't necessarily correct, it may not be harmful to the viewer, right? That's what some might believe. But my thought is the flaw that we're making, maybe the pain that we're causing, or the crack that's forming we are uh, because of our sort of failures to search for truth, honestly, is that we're teaching people to argue, right? So when you put two people on CNN or Fox or MSNBC, doesn't matter. The point isn't which. And the fact that I have to say that now is also clearly a sign that something's wrong.
Right.
How on earth could there be news and I have to go, if you're this one, or this one, all of which are different? Uh, that's not the point. The point is the mechanism. The point is the mechanism. We'll take two people and we'll put them on TV and we'll have them argue. We'll have them argue. Trump's awesome. Trump's bad. So global warming's real. Global warming's bad. This fighter's amazing. This fighter's No, he isn't. Whatever we're doing, for the most part, the people that we choose, that we reward, and our system rewards for putting on there, are not the people with the most truth. They're often the people with either the least truth or the most conflict or the most controversy or the best at talking, but they're not people searching for truth. They're people with objectives and bias. And again, sometimes people will hear this kind of conversation and go, "That's right, the liberals are like that," or "That's right, the conservatives are like that." They're not. What we rarely hear is somebody say this and go, "Wait a second, are we all like that? Could I be like that too? Could my team be that like that?" But what starts happening is we then fight. Then the viewers think literally that fighting with almost no information other than the information you just heard the talking head say is logical. Um, Whereas if instead, and if you denounce that and you fail because it's so easy and you get rewarded so highly for creating conflict or controversy, and you even when like I said, Conor McGregor can beat Floyd Mayweather. That was like 4 years ago. That got so much pop and so much attention, and I was rewarded for it so much. It grew all of my platforms. People talked about my stuff. People who were unaware of me were aware of me. It was so valuable that and I felt it, but I don't have the stomach for it because the nature of it is also like you just yell at each other and you're dumb, no, you're dumb, but everybody grow their followers grow. So I don't have the stomach for it. So I don't like it, and it feels wrong to me. But I can see how it's a trap. I can see how you start to just say the most controversial thing and the other guy does, and then you fight, and then Twitter fights, and then everybody fights. And all of a sudden, we're in a world where, you take 100 people and 30, 30, and 30 believe three completely different things. And it was because all like 80, 90% of the information they were getting was untruth. We were rewarding untruth. We were rewarding controversy. We were rewarding the edgiest thing. We were rewarding the most extreme thing. And so that system is happening. Um, and yes, if my goal was make $400,000 more a year than I make right now, and that was my only goal, that I can see how that would be appealing. But my goal is to figure out what's true and really learn it and really make sense of it and really find comfort in it and really like learn about the mechanisms of how you discover truth and the mechanisms of how real study is done, and the mechanisms of how real growth is done, and what happens when you try and fail, and all those things. I think these are valuable things. I think the idea of just saying the most extreme things so that my shit grows and my platforms grow and I get the most engagement, that is happening everywhere. And but I also think there's a world of us who are like, we see that, we're not attracted to it. We understand that it's wrong, that it's not valuable, and that there's a pendulum swing the other way towards just trying to figure out what's factual as best you can. And I like that. I feel good doing that. I feel when I look for it and I try to understand it, I feel good about really trying to figure out what's true, knowing still that all models are wrong, but some models are useful. Like the model I'm creating is wrong because 100 years in the future, I will know for certain that the things I think are happening in this fight, as we understand how the brain works different, or the body works different, or the relationship between two nervous systems work different, or we just have better language. What I'm saying about fighting today will one day be wrong, but I want it to be the best that I can possibly, the rightest it can be under the circumstances.
And there's another angle to the two sides arguing piece of it, in addition to the person who's being rewarded for being the loudest clown is now being rewarded for not being themselves. So there's that hall of mirrors. I'm only seeing
Mm-hmm.
myself reflected in this mob of hatred, and that's what I've become. So that's going to eat away at your soul.
Mm-hmm.
Also, there's the angle that it's just like pro wrestling with the narrative. The audience knows that that guy hates that guy and I love him, and that other dude could die in a fire and I'd be happy about it. And then it's never really hitting home that both of those dudes are paid by the same company,
Yeah.
and that they go home and shake hands and are like, that was a good one, Bob. Thanks, Clint. I really appreciate
That's
that.
right. Man, you ever watch Bugs Bunny? You ever watch Early Bugs Bunny? I mean, when you see, there are ones where they check in and out, where the coyote and the sheep, they check in and out and they fight all day. True. There's also, though, there's so many things about this that you can see happening, and we can chat about it. We also will get caught up in it. 99 times out of 100, we won't. You can work towards 93 times or 99 times out of 100, but when you're tired or when you're stressed out or when you're overwhelmed, you're going to get caught up in it. So you don't judge people for getting caught up in it, but it snowballs. um, People also don't quite realize, like, if you wanted to be one technique people use to become good at anything, and it gets a bad rap, and even saying it in its traditional terms sounds wrong, but they say fake it till you make it. And so there's a bad side of that, of course, but there's a good one, like where you get the gymnast to do the thing they can't do as if they could do it. You get the person to go through it and to act as if they're there. You get the singer who can't hit the note to keep singing as if they can sing it, and eventually they do. Because the act of doing, regardless of what is happening in there, becomes real. So if we all say it's just pro wrestling, it's still becoming real. We still develop hatred for that side. We still develop conflict. We still fight with them, even if and we just fall into it. It's like a type of training. We're being trained to behave a particular way. We're being rewarded. We're being celebrated. We're feeling like we're part of a team, and all of a sudden that behavior becomes normal. I also. I told you I was sung in a rock band, and in the early incarnation of my rock band, much like you're saying, I had a character, and that character was arrogant. He was rude. He would say sort of, provocative things about the girls in the crowd. Although at least that I always did with sort of a wink, and I always felt like, and even certain insults I did with enough of a wink that I let you know the real me doesn't think this, the character does. And so that worked really well to a certain degree. But then in interviews and stuff, I would play the character. So I would say mean things about other bands, or I would talk about how, the record business is garbage. It wasn't my real thinking, because I would really go and send a demo tape to those people I was talking about. I said I was playing a role, but some of it gets blurred. You're still saying it enough that it starts to become somewhat real. It's like it's a practice. You practice being an asshole long enough, even though you're wearing a costume or you have a fake name. Eventually, you're just an asshole, right? And so I'm so thankful for that experience, and it was really fun, and I'm very thankful that like 97% of my audience really got it, really understood the sort of the joke of it, and the artificiality of it. But at the same time, you play it long enough, you become it, you know. And I would say things. I remember near the end of it, I would say things about my friends who played in bands, and literally like said provocative and ridiculous things about them. And I remember somebody would say that they got mad. And I'm like, why would they get mad? They don't understand the shtick. And it's like, well, eventually it's not a shtick. I'm their friend. I said something mean. Like, regardless of what hidden intent I might have thought I had, I still did it. Right. And I think we're all doing that to a certain degree when we look at the other side, who are also reasonable humans, being brainwashed just as much as us. But those ones, the ones on the other channel, color TV channel, they're dummies. And even though we have friends who believe the dumb things they believe, and they have friends who believe the dumb things we believe, we start to say shit about how stupid they are, or how, like, what's wrong with them. And it may start out as pro wrestling style, funny shit but eventually we hate them and we hate each other. And so we're all learning to do that. And I just talk about people fighting. I don't pretend to think that's going to change the world. But if everybody whose job it is to go on and look for, instead of building narratives and hyping things and telling overly telling stories and steering conversation to a particular way, if instead a lot of people go in and just look for truth and try to find truth, look for process, look for how and why, I think it's a bonus. I think it's a good thing. I think more of that is good, and I want to do more of that.
And that's reminding me. of earlier talk, you mentioning acceptance as part of the journey of martial arts, and I want to drill in on that because it's a profound truth that's difficult to appreciate from the outside. So for pundits who are pushing that narrative or resisting the way things are through not admitting reality and truth, but pushing against it, trying to assert their narrative that is not true, right? It's the degree to which you resist reality that gives reality the leverage to completely destroy your life. And that
It's
plays
good.
out in a fight too. If
Hmm.
you resist what's happening, you're seizing yourself up, and now the other person has a much better leverage against your center of mass because you're all rigid, right? You're literally resisting.
Sure.
The
Yeah.
more you can accept what's happening, paradoxically, to
And
people who don't experience
yeah,
it, you actually gain more control over how it unfolds the more accepting you are of what's happening.
100% true. And even before, like even as you prepare, you look over, that guy sucks. He can't hang with me. I'm gonna ruin him. He's not a good fighter. I mean, if that's not true, like before we've even got into the first exchanges, we are now dealing without reality. We are operating outside of reality. Is there some value? It, is there a is reality plastic to an elastic to a certain degree? Of course, there is some elasticity in reality. So if that guy is way better than me, but on my best day, I believe that I can equal him. That could be true. That'll have some value. Um, or is it better if he's the greatest of all time if I say he's just a man? Because that is true. That's also true, right? But if you lie, if you just resist reality before we even got there, we got a problem. And then you're right there. The reality is this man's on my back trying to choke me. If that reality is there and I accept that, and I've been fighting my whole life, somebody choking me is something I deal with every single day. It's true. And when somebody is choking you, if you can calmly get two hands onto one hand and fight the one hand, and then maybe get your shoulder to there's a process through which I can work within the truth of the reality that this guy's choking me. If most of the time when there's a reality, technology has been this for a lot of people, but the reality of change, um, you're right, happens because people either first deny it. So somebody's on my back is choking me. I deny it. No, nobody's on my back. Like, of course I'm fucked, right? Like, you can't deny that. That's true. Then they resist it. The next thing is, well, sure, YouTube's real, but fuck YouTube. We're in the TV business. Now you're resisting it. You're too tight. You're panicking, right? Now you choked too. If you say, hey, look, YouTube's real. Our television numbers are dropping. Why don't we calmly start to pivot ever so slightly towards the reality that this change is happening? We do that before you know what, you're out of the difficult. So that acceptance is true. This I mentioned Fight Network where I worked and where that change happened. That change happened, and this was a part of my learning, sort of acceptance and learning, sort of to understand this. So I guess it was approximately 3 years ago, maybe a little three and a half now, that they just laid off all our entire creative department. So basically, we made content. And I remember about a year after that happened, I was around I was actually at Gary Vaynerchuk's business in New York, talking with a couple of his staff. And they were like, how were you able to become independent? And I said, well, this company laid off, our entire creative department and our digital department. And they're like, wait a second, that company closed their digital department in 2017. And of course, in retrospect, in the 3 years since, you know, people would spend 20 times what they used to spend to create half of what we already had, but they couldn't see it. And in fact, that the executives in that company, they resisted the change harder than I've ever seen. First, they denied it. They're like, oh, YouTube, that's a fad. Then they downplayed it. Oh, it's just pennies. I mean, nobody's even on there. And then they resisted it. Well, you know, and that's just what happens. People first deny something is happening. First, they don't see it at all. They're like, hey, wait, I think there's a change going on. They're like, nothing's happening. Then maybe they see it, but they downplay it. Oh, it's nothing. And then from downplay, they go, well, it could be a thing, but it doesn't apply. It's just it. Then they think it's an outlier. Well, some people are doing this thing, but it's not a big thing. And then they resist it. They maybe see it's real, and then they start to resist. No, 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 deny it. Start to make internal changes within the company to sort of make what they believe seem more true. We're going to do more of this and less of that, and try to kind of shift it in such a way that to make it true. But then ultimately, the resistance to you cannot resist change. Like change is real. Reality is real. You can say all you want, and not. I don't know who's watching or listening to us right now, because just even what I was about to say, which to a large percent, to 97% of scientists or 99% of scientists wouldn't find this shocking, but some people will. It's like global warming is real. Like the effect of humans on the Earth is real. But some people just won't believe that. They'll resist that. Now, what would the resistance of that look like? Tension, conflict, arguing, fighting, doing worse, but pushing it off until it's sort of too late. And that's just what humans do. Um, but yeah, you're right. You study fighting, you study that truth, and you learn very quickly. That guy's really on my back. He's really trying to choke me. I should stay calm. I should accept that this is happening so that I can take action about it. Here it is. It's real. So let's deal with it. Oh, cool. Now that it's real, I know what it is. I haven't panicked. I've been training my whole life to deal with it. I've dealt with it. Now we're better. Now, and we carry on. Yeah, it's an interesting time. It's a very, very strange time between truth, acceptance, sort of that push and pull of what people believe reality is, media. All of these topics we're talking about are just so intertwined with everything that's happening in the world right
It really is. And in part of that whole resisting and ignoring and saying, no, that's just an outlier, and then it becomes bigger
now.
and bigger, oftentimes gets dismissed as, oh, that's just a slippery slope argument. And it's as
Hmm.
though calling something a slippery slope is a reasonable disproving of truth. So maybe
Well,
we should just call it the slippery rear naked choke. Just like,
yeah.
listen, you can call it slippery all you want. You're still going to sleep.
Well, a true slippery slope would be somewhere. I heard that the internet is going to be a big thing, years ago. I've heard that YouTube and Instagram and these things are going to be big, but I don't think they are. And what if we don't pay attention and change, we're going to go out of business. It's like that. Although that may have been true to some degree, that's a slippery slope. What a slippery slope isn't is first we saw this happen, and then we saw this happen, and then this thing took place, and then this added to that, and now we see momentum where you know the best companies in the world have somebody that they call a first class noticer. A first class noticer is someone whose actual job it is to not predict the future but to see the present. You don't have to predict the future and say in 2017 and say if you aren't moving your business to digital, you're going to be fucked. That's not predicting the future. That's just identifying the present, because we went from radio to television to this kind of thing to digital to YouTube to social media to smaller fragmented things to this isn't. I'm not predicting the future. If you think I'm predicting the future, you'll call it a slippery slope. This is the present. When you see these seven things happen and we are here, you are seeing the flow of what's going on. That's not a slippery slope argument. The slippery slope argument is if I don't barbecue today, my leg might cut off. And somebody goes, what do you mean? Well, I'm going to run out. If I don't barbecue today, and then I'll stop eating meat entirely. When that happens, I'll have a problem with my blood. And if that happens, I'm going to do this. And then next thing you know, my leg. That's a slippery slope. There's no evidence to suggest that that's going to happen. but typically there is a large, like, why do some people get rich during a mortgage, right after a mortgage crisis? Why do some people are not, they're not there when a tornado happens? Why are some people position their business in a place to be successful digitally? Because they see the present. This is the present. You know, what happens is, if you deny what got us here, then you can easily deny the future. But if you accept what got us here, then it's not a slippery slope. It's a natural progression based on a long bit of information. But if we argue about what got us here, then we got a problem. You know, we argue about, oh well, that didn't happen, and then that thing didn't. Oh, when he said this to put a light inside the body, he meant this thing. Like, whatever you want to argue about in the past, if we can't agree what's happened up till today, then we're going to have a problem predicting, anticipating how tomorrow's going
And why
to go.
there's such a push to recontextualize history, because that's exactly it. If you can redefine the facts, you now are affecting their meaning. Once you change meaning, you now are changing what should be done based on that meaning. And now you've
Right.
affected the trajectory of the future.
Yeah. Uh, if we just asked 50 people, who all, 100 people, and 50 of them do yoga, when do you feel the best? Just in general. And yoga is just one example. Mindfulness, there's a million things that are examples of how some people feel this way when they drive. When do you feel great? I feel great when I'm right here. I feel great when I'm right here. The world is real. I'm driving my car. I'm not reading a book. I'm not surfing the internet. I'm not thinking about the future or the past. I'm just driving my car. I'm just doing yoga. I'm just doing jujitsu. I'm just doing that bit of work that I find incredibly, intrinsically rewarding. And I'm here. Our society is thinking a lot about the future and a lot about the past, and trying to change it and control it, and redefine it and rewrite it, and and force where it's going to go. And we all know that doesn't work. Like, that doesn't work for the individual, and that doesn't work for large groups of people. That doesn't work for civilizations. Like, right now, what's happening? What can we do to make right now better? What are we missing? uh, but you're right. We're rewriting things, we're recontextualizing things, we're changing the meaning of things, and then we're saying, that thing that we all agreed meant this thing like 10 years ago. Well, your company did not that thing, so now we're mad at you. It's like, but everybody thought that then, you know. Uh, yeah, it's a weird one, man. We're
Hmm.
you know, all I'm personally happiest when I'm learning something, or something is, new information is being given to me that helps me kind of figure out the world around me. I'm least happy when there's some kind of weird conflict about something that isn't making sense, or we don't all start from the same thing. Like, have you ever, most people haven't done this, but if you've ever argued with somebody where you were speaking two different languages, this happened to my friend and I in Russia. My friend John Ramdeen. We were in Russia, and we were commentating the World Combat Games. It was amazing. It was like, I think I did 18 different martial arts in 16 days. Sumo, and an ancient form of belt wrestling, and judo and karate and everything. It was wonderful. I loved it. And but it was tricky because we were in the small suburb of St. Petersburg, but we were in stadiums all day. It was long travel, and we didn't speak the language, and we didn't have the simple things that we are used to, like coffee or things like that. But then when we got to the hotel every night, they had all this cheap vodka and really tasty food, and it was really fun. And one night, my friend Ramdeen gets into this argument with this Russian guy who's very, very drunk, and he's yelling at him, and Ramdeen's yelling back at him, and I'm looking at him going, "What the fuck are either of these guys doing?" Like, neither one understands what they're saying, but they're both yelling at each other, and it's kind of what's happening now. Like, people are arguing, but they're not arguing about the same thing. And I saw that recently in my sort of my own. Identified something myself. I'm like, I'm disagreeing with a lot of things happening in in my job. I'm seeing how it's done, or I'm seeing bits and pieces of roles where I'll be asked to do something, or I'll watch how and I'm like, I don't this is it's like we're speaking the same language. And I realize that I analyze art within the world of sport. And those really are two different languages. And so now I've started to understand just recently how much conflict that can create in my own mind. Trying to understand just, and then you see that where entire groups of people, thousands or tens of thousands of people, are arguing, but they're just not arguing about the same thing, and they're not arguing with the same information, and they don't all have the same goals and objectives. Yeah, it's a weird one. It's a weird time.
Really is. The way I appreciate that is I had a really tough time translating the images in my head into words because I have a degree in painting and art, like that's my
Mm,
jam. And I realized I would need to be able to get my ideas across if I needed to get a job or sell somebody on the idea of hiring me, like whatever. I needed to be able
mhm,
to communicate better. So I took debate in high school
mm.
for 3 years in a row. Every semester, I took debate. And the particular flavor that I was in was called Lincoln Douglas debate. And it was more about morals and philosophy, not about
Mm,
how things are going to be done by policy, not policy debate. It was, should we be doing this in the first place? So you would
I
have a
like it.
resolution like, should the death penalty be abolished? And you go to the debate tournament on a Saturday. So you're going to some other high school on your Saturday. So there's your nerd cred right there.
Yeah,
And
big time.
and then you argue for one round, and then you argue against the other round, and you argue for.
Oh,
So you have to debate both sides of it. Here's the really weird thing that my teacher instilled in me when I was maybe 16 years old. He said, the debate is not about the resolution. The debate is about what the debate is about.
mm,
And that took
mm,
me a long time to unpack. And it was more along the lines of you have to agree about what it is that we're both here to discuss. Then we
mhm,
can move forward. Until you have that agreement, you can't take them anywhere.
mhm.
And you win the debate when the other person agrees about the topic that you're about to talk about.
Wow,
So you could say, well,
wow.
this is a debate about human dignity, not putting a price on human life. This
Yeah.
is what we're talking about. The other person goes, no, we're talking about what's best for
Wow.
everybody in as many cases
Yeah,
as
yeah,
possible. We're
yeah.
talking about right. So you can't have a debate or a conversation until you both agree about what it is you're going to be talking about. And the instant the other person agrees with you, they're now locked into your framework of agreement.
Mhm,
And therefore the natural conclusion is in support of your argument, right?
mhm.
So
Very
it's
interesting.
it's a meta conversation that nobody ever has, and there's not even a resolution that they're arguing about. It's like you said, two drunk people arguing in different languages.
Yeah,
I'm upset
yeah,
about this thing.
yeah,
You look like a reasonable excuse for me to pile on all of my
yeah.
baggage as a useful dummy for me to fight against.
Mhm. That's really interesting. That's really, really interesting. Um, I've started to want to very my instinct now is I don't want to argue at all. And not because I don't think I have something to say, but mostly because I think the fundamental concept of the argument, not the one you've just discussed, the idea of the debate you've just discussed, but the typical argument is people will say, well, never mind X, Y, and Z. Let's just talk about the facts. It's like, but we're not starting with the same facts. And that's where the problem lies. And there's also, if you even engage at all in any kind of social media or any kind of world where people are, they want you to convince them of something, but it's like, I don't know how to convince you of something it's taken me 50 years to grasp. And why am I here? And why are we doing this? And what's in this for anybody? And, you know, it's a very strange scenario now when you go to debate something, because also anybody would just go and debate with, the minister of finance, would debate politics and finance with that person in Canada or America or France or wherever. It's like, but you can't debate, and because you don't have the same amount of information and what you're dealing with is not the same. And they'd say, well, let's just deal with the facts, but you don't have any facts. Like, so we cannot. And this is what's happening in most of it. And this is, but again, I think we're all being taught that we should argue because we turn on the TV and there's 2 to 10 heads yelling at each other and they're arguing with each other and they're doing it. And we think, okay, well, let's have one of these debates. And this is something else I see a lot where people will say, you know, you gain. The other day, I was on Twitter, and I've been engaging in different ways over a while, and kind of completely burned out, kind of trying to engage in different ways, and so I was slowing down, and I was really kind of easing down all of my engagement and relaxing and trying to just do better work and whatever. But I kept thinking, there's some meaning here. What am I doing here? What is the point of this? What am I gaining? And I realized, it just hit me, and I don't remember exactly what I wrote, but it was something like, if I took 80% of all the minutes that I spent just sort of engaging with people in debate or discussion about things, and applied them all to self improvement or work or learning, how much more could I learn and how much more useful could I be? And I realized immediately I had just found the cheat code. The whole point was that there's no point to this. And that every minute spent in this way is minutes I could get knowing what opportunity cost is, and that we have a limited amount of time in the day, that every one of those, and my time's pretty maxed. Where can I get more time? Well, 80% of those minutes. That's where the time will be. I can learn more. I can study more. I can improve more. I can physically do martial arts. I can study my body. I can do it. There's 1,000 things I can do. And so I said this, and a lot of people are like, "That's a really good idea." But some people would said, "No, I think it's a bad idea because you will gain so much more from engaging with those who disagree with you." And I thought, I understand the idea of this, but if we look back at the last 5 years of how all humans have been doing this, has that actually worked more than 2 or 3% of the time? And I think the answer is no. I think almost exclusively we gain nothing. In fact, I think we pull back even harder into our niches and throw flaming things at each other from our sides, believing even less. So I don't think that's true. People want to believe that's true, or they use that as an excuse to continue this illogical and possibly dangerous behavior. But I don't think it is true. I don't think I do gain anything by engaging with somebody who believes entirely different than me. Certainly not if I don't know who they are or what they know or where they come from or what their beliefs are or how educated they might be, or I don't know anything about that. So I realized that all those minutes are minutes to use in a more meaningful way.
And in pointing back to resistance, fighting against through resistance, in a way, gives the other side, if you want to frame it that way, more structure and
Mm-hmm.
more energy to develop their resistance. So
Mm-hmm.
through actively fighting, you're giving the other dynamic your energy to create and perpetuate what it is
Yeah.
you're trying to fight against.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's that weird, you become what it is you're trying to destroy
Yeah.
through the energy of trying to destroy it. But then
Mm-hmm.
people go, well, you're running away from evil. You're just retreating into your enclave and protecting yourself. But
Mm-hmm.
in a way, it's signaling to other people that you don't have to accept the other person's tempo. You don't have to
Mm-hmm.
accept every invitation to a fight that is solely at your pain and misery. Like you don't have to
Yeah.
be a sacrificial animal, the whims of somebody who wants to eat you. Like, no, thank you.
100%. 100%. I Yes, very true. I think the other thing is that my root of this, where I feel the strongest, that what I believe on this is right for me right now, is I think the greatest if I'm trying to do good, the greatest good I can do is through improving myself. I think if I make a better me with a better perspective, with a kinder treatment of others, I will affect more people positively than I will by fighting with somebody about something. Also, fighting with them generally makes a worse me. All the yelling, I try to will them to see things differently. And why can't you understand this? I become a less quality human being, person, friend, all of those things. So I think that right there is my strongest reason to disengage from that. But the other one, you said fighting evil. I think this is the I think this is the real, this is the real answer here is nobody thinks they're the evil side. That's the thing. Like, you know, the others, this is the reason why good people can do bad things or have bad beliefs because there's if 40% of the people, like, I'll throw one out here. I would have never believed there would be a time in my life where I could say racism is bad and that might be a controversial topic. Like, I just never foresaw that such a time would exist. Um, And let's say that 30% of people right now strongly disagree with me. And they're like, or they won't disagree with that, but they'll change the conversation in some way. They're not evil. How the way that people will tend to, and of course there are exceptions, there are very scary individuals. The way large groups of people will do things is by being certain that they are right and it is for the good for some reason, and that even if they have to do some bad, that the ends will justify the means. Or they get caught up in it, or they aren't heavy thinkers and they get dragged into believing in something and being part of it. I mean, most people agree that World War II, there was a very, very bad period of humanity where a lot of good people did bad things. They weren't all evil people. Either the ends justified the means, or they lost the ability to think for themselves, or they like. So nobody in the equation is like, well, I'm evil. Hey, and so I'm like, so if we think we're going to fight against evil, nobody thinks they're evil. The other side is just as certain that whatever side you're on of any discussion, for the most part, the other side is just as certain that you're crazy. And if and when we pause and think about it, it's like, okay, those guys believe this extreme thing. If you're gay, you're going to go to heaven. They believe that strongly. I think that's crazy. Or sorry, they're going to go to hell. You're gay, so therefore you're going to go to hell. That should be outlawed. You should not be able to marry or fall in love with someone of the same sex. That's evil. I think anyone who believes that is a little crazy. I think that something has not gone appropriately in the processing of the normal way that humans would progress if they weren't being indoctrinated with particular ideas that they wouldn't think that way. But they think exactly the same thing of me. They think exactly the same thing of me. They're like, something must be wrong with me to believe that my two of my friends that happen to be female or male should be able to live together and be in love and get married. They think I'm crazy. Now, if I can get into the idea that their belief is just as strong as mine because of their life experience, I don't have to look at them as crazy, evil, bad, whatever. I'm just like, we're all just a product of our lifetime of experience, of the knowledge we've gained, the indoctrinations we've been exposed to, what we've learned, trial and error. You know, we've been allotted a belief system, we've been allotted a religion, we've been allotted we happen to be born into a particular economic structure, and here we are. So, but nobody in the equation is sitting there going, "Well, we're the evil ones. Why don't you go and deal with us?" Like, everybody thinks they're doing the right thing, and that's what makes it so hard.
I had that moment kind of late in my high school years of going, well, I grew up believing this, and I'm pretty sure that if I grew up somewhere else, I would have grown up believing that. And I'm pretty sure that they'd feel exactly the same way as I feel right now. And if we all
That's right.
feel the same way about the thing for the same, it's an emergent
Yeah.
property, not a universal truth. Oh, okay. I can give this up now.
hmm Yeah, yeah, and that's so fucking powerful. It's so, it's also scary. It's like, wait, what do I believe? What do I believe, and why do I believe it? Wait, how much of this is my own free will? But you work your way through that um, in enough time, and you
You'll
figure
get
out.
punched in the
You know,
face a couple times. You'll work through
exactly.
it real fast.
Yeah, yeah, you will. I was in Russia. I've been to Russia a lot of times. It's one of the most interesting places. I love going there. I love the people. Southeast Asia. I've been in Myanmar and Singapore and all these different places. And everyone's so different, and everyone's so interesting, and they're like all like having their own different sort of struggles with things, but we're all so similar. Um, but while I was in Russia on this other trip, um, this I went to knock on this guy's door. He was about 20, and he had a lot of responsibility within this fighting show. And somebody said, "Go knock," and they said, "Well, it's whatever time it was. Let's say it's 1 o'clock." It's 1 o'clock. If he doesn't answer, just wait outside the door because he's in there. Just knock once, and just don't worry, he'll be there. And so I did, and I waited, and then I waited a few minutes, and I had nowhere to go. It's a small hotel in Russia on the eighth floor or whatever, near the elevator, and just stand there. And then shortly later, he opened the door. And I noticed that there was a little bit of redness on his forehead, and I noticed that there was a prayer blanket there. And we chatted. I love the guy, super cool. And I walked away, and I was like, "Oh, neat. He's Chechen. He's Muslim." And I'm like, "Oh, that's really cool." Um, we have, and I thought about it. I'm like, we have different experience, we have different cultures, we have different beliefs, we have different, all these things. So many things I can learn. And I did, and I spent a lot of time with him, and we chatted about all kinds of stuff, and it was really cool. I thought about it a little more, like on my way home, and not in any good or bad way, not in that, just in a very general way. I thought about religion, and I realized that none of us, almost none of us, like literally it's near zero, have ever been sat down at any point in our life where somebody laid out and said, "Here's all the religions in the world. Here's what they all believe. Here's all the information and the strong. Here's everything. Why don't you select for yourself what would be the right belief system for you?" Nobody's done that with money. Nobody's done that with politics. Nobody's done that with science. No, none of us have ever had that. None of us have ever had that in anything. Nobody's ever said, "Here it all is. Why don't and here's all the information available. Why don't you figure out what's best for you?" Based on being granted everything, and none of us get to do that. So as a result, we can't. We really shouldn't take some amount of like pride in our strong defense of our beliefs or some strong defense of what we think is good and bad. They're just assigned to us until we go out into the world and gather more information. And not all of us get the chance to do that. A lot of us live in places where we only get that same message from other people who have the same things and they believe the same things. And eventually we're going to grow up and believe that stuff. And not all of it's perfect. Some of it's going to cause conflict in our lives. But that's where we're at, you know? And it's the way I put it maybe actually feels pretty comfortable to me. Like, um, and I don't know what part of what I said there would be a part that somebody would want to argue with, but I'm sure there would be one. But if only we could see it all and get exposed to all of it, and then be able to go, yes, I think that's good, and I believe in this, and I would like to believe in those things, and I think this will be a part of my structure of how I think, and we don't get to do that. So uh, as a result, I don't think we should judge other people's stuff, and I don't think we should so powerfully defend ours.
Hmm. Yeah, it's kind of like in our formative years. I mean, you're born with what you're born with, and then you grow up shaping that through your experience and your family life and all of that stuff is basically installing your operating system for your fundamental
Mhm.
beliefs about how the world works. And then after age 5, 7, whatever, you now are actively making choices to live out that belief system and just
That's scary.
all day every day, man.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
oh, It's tough.
Oh, I know it's frightening. It's tough, but we also, we do. I think we do have the free choice to be able to learn other things, and but it's not easy. But it's harder at first, I think. Then the more new ideas you get exposed to, the more, like we were talking about change, the more comfortable you get, the more you realize you were wrong too, and that's okay. It's like, oh, I thought this way, but now I don't. Wait, what? Not only is that thing okay that you changed, but maybe you learn that the process of that's okay. How did I learn anything in particular? Why do I feel so? Why am I mad right now? Like, why did somebody say something and I'm mad? They're just talking. They're just opening up. The flesh there. They're using some things in here to express sounds that are floating around in their head and may or may not mean anything too specific based on how randomly they just spoke. And I'm angry. Like, how did that happen? Why am I mad? Like, where did that come from? But and I think all of these things, I think for me, studying martial arts, studying your body, studying how you breathe and move and think and handle conflict, that's been my way to learn some of these things and think about them. But I truly believe committing to trying to master anything reveals these same things. I think truly searching for mastery, and at different times, the forced humility that to be able to grow, the humility that gets forced on you to realize, God, I know very little, you know, uh, and then other times you feel like you know a lot. And it's so incredible compared to what you knew 10 years ago because you've been on the study. But then it hits you again. Wait a second, compared to what is possible to be known, I literally know nothing. And that push and the pull of that, I think, helps you kind of, you know, peel away some of this kind of stuff. But it's all just a path, and sometimes we're better at it than others. Sometimes you're calmer and smarter and easier going than you are other times, and you know, um, but it's just part of it, I think.
Yeah. No, I think that's as good a place as any to put a bow on it. I've taken a lot of your time and I definitely appreciate it. So on the kind of transition out, for the folks that are out there listening, vibing with what you're saying, what's the best way for them to engage with your work?
Well, thanks, man. And I've enjoyed this. I knew I would. Like, I kind of put a little, asterisk when I was figuring out time we could hang out because I had a feeling I was going to enjoy
Well, thank
chatting
you.
with you. But I do those 1 minute breakdowns and 2 minute breakdowns and sometimes 15-second ones that we were talking about on Instagram at Robin Black Martial Arts. And I've at Robin Black Martial Arts on Facebook as well, at
Hmm.
Robin Black MMA on Twitter. And I have a YouTube channel that I only use like once or twice a week. And a lot of it is this type of pontificating and exploring of ideas, sometimes by myself, sometimes with somebody else. But maybe you join me on it, and we could get together, and I'll sit on the other end and I'll shut up longer and you can talk
Don't you
longer.
threaten me with a good time.
Yeah, yeah. Let's do it. But my YouTube is youtube.com/Robin Black. But I'm on most platforms, and I work for Bellator, which is the second biggest MMA show in the world, and I analyze the UFC on TSN in Canada, and I commentate that way, which is a martial art of 9 limbs, including the headbutts. Bare knuckle martial arts, 1,000-year-old Burmese martial art that I commentate, and bare knuckle boxing in England. So I get to do what I love to do a lot, but I put something up every day on my platforms because the path for me is you must do it. Like, you have to keep doing the thing. If I'm sitting around waiting till the next time there's a show so I can hold a microphone and say the things that a analyst says, I'm not doing it. To me, that's the incidental thing to the path, which is do it every day, get better every day, learn something every day, try and fail every day. And so I do that every day, and I share it across multiple platforms for people to enjoy and or not enjoy. But yes, let's get together again. Let's do it here, and come on my YouTube channel sometime too, man.
Deal. Deal. Awesome. That's a wrap for me on this. And yeah, thank you. I really
You're
do
welcome.
appreciate the time, and I'll hold you to it. I got a lot of wacky ideas from the performing world too, so that I'd love to dig
Cool.
in that there too. So
Yep.
my goal is to get this out the door. I'm already scheduled up for this Monday's release, and then probably the Monday after that, I'll have it all put together with a bow, and then
Sweet.
I'll
If you've got any 1 or 2 minute chunks where something interesting or intelligent rolls out within 59 seconds or 2 minutes and 20 seconds, put your stuff on it and send them to me, and I'll share it with links to your stuff.
cool. Thank you very much. I'll
Yeah,
put that
you're
together.
welcome.
So yeah, all right. I'm
Okay.
gonna hit stop on this. I'm gonna hit stop on my backup as well. There we go. And that. So yeah, that's all the